It's been a DART extravaganza this week at the Daily Space, and indeed all over the planetary science community. In case you've been living under a rock or are still scarred by counting rocks on Bennu, the DART mission successfully booped or possibly smacked into the asteroid Dimorphos on Monday, September 26th. Joining us today is Eric Palmer, a senior scientist at the Planetary Science Institute, who has been involved in the shape modeling of the asteroid Didymos. Thank you for joining us today, Eric.
Thank you.
So tell us about your involvement in the DART mission. What does shape modeling mean? What does it entail?
So to fully understand what is going on, we need to get an accurate representation of the surface of Dimorphos. So when the impactor hits, we need to know where it hits. We need to know what the slopes of the surface is, so we understand the angles of impact, because that will affect how much momentum is transferred into spin versus a translational energy, meaning slow the orbit down. Mm-hmm. So all of those parameters needs to be understood. So we have to take the images and we have to extract out what the shape should be. So that's one of the primary science goals that we need is an accurate shape model. And I've been doing this for several years. I'm more in the support for them in this regard, in terms of helping them with training, helping them get the shape modeling software configured and set up for this. However, we also, from a scientific standpoint, want to get an accurate shape model for Didymos. Mm-hmm. And so while they're worried about the impact and such, because they're over at the Applied Physics Laboratory, I'm over here at PSI and I'm focusing on the shape model of the primary. And that helps us understand the orbital dynamics, the evolution of the system, the stability of the system, the gravity field that it's interacting with. Of course, the ejecta as it leaves is going to be influenced by the gravity more of the primary than the secondary. So having an accurate shape model is essential. And so that's my primary role right now, is to take the images that we have and convert that into a 3D digital train model.
And what sort of images did you have? My understanding was that this was what we saw on Draco on Monday, and we will talk about this. It was sort of the first time we really saw Didymos. Yeah. So what sort of images were you working from to get a shape model in advance?
So there was some radar imaging prior to this that got a general size and a general structure of it. And then now that we have the real pictures, a lot of that ambiguity goes away and we can actually start dealing with the specifics. One of the downsides is we only have a single moment in time and we're only seeing one face of the surface. Mm-hmm. So when we do this for a normal mission, such as OSIRIS-REx, we're approaching Bennu. We take pictures over the course of 4 hours, which is one Bennu rotation. So we get it from all different angles, about every 20 degrees of rotation. And that lets us really see all of the surface and get a really nice shape model. But for Didymos and Dimorphos, we're really limited. We get one side. Mm-hmm. And so obviously the backside is going to have to be taken from theory, just kind of filled in. The technique we're using, one of the ways to build a shape model is you can take the profile of the object, the limbs, and convert that into a shape model. In this particular case, that's only going to give you the one loon, as it was called, just the outside perimeter. Right. With the technique that I'm using, that Dr. Bob Gaskell has been working on for years, we actually use the surface and we start using a little bit of stereo, but in this case, it's going to be mostly photoclinometry to extract out what the front surface is rather than only just the profile. So we'll get the front surface at a decent level, we'll get the profile, and then the backside's going to be pretty much a guess.
So walk us through what you were doing on Monday as this was all going down. I was live streaming. I was talking to a variety of scientists. Everybody was excited and on the edge of their seat. what was your day like? How did it go for you?
So the morning we started off with our science meeting that, started about 7 hours prior. And so we had about a 2-hour science meeting. We talked about all the stuff. We reviewed the spacecraft status, what was expected. We had discussions about what we could and could not release to the media. We talked about a lot of the ground-based observing plans. We got a few of the images, still 7 hours out of the system, and I think they were saying that, hey, we can actually start to make out Dimorphos. So that was during the science meeting, and so that excitement was really nice. It was very palatable that we were included in that. And then we go off to our respective worlds as we wait for the stuff to kick off. And yeah, probably about an hour prior, I was watching the live stream and kind of catching up. And then the background, I'm over there, and we now start getting data where the objects are spatially resolved. So that means I can actually pull them into my software, and I can take this tiny little 3-pixel or 5-pixel thing and start trying to align it with the our starting shape model. So we start, we start with a shape model, we align the images to that model, and then we start processing it. So during the whole impact, I'm over, on the side downloading images and trying to get them registered and make sure my system is all squared away, because obviously it's only the last few minutes that had high enough resolution data for me to do my job. So all this preliminary stuff is not it doesn't really move the needle at all, because 10 minutes later those images are so much better than the ones I had before. You just don't want to use the ones before. So it was getting that all squared away.
Did you get to allow yourself a few minutes of watching the images come in, or were you just busy focused on the actual science computing side of it?
Oh no, I definitely, got caught up in the moment, and I went around to, the people that, work here at PSI, and I was like, are you guys watching live stream? You gotta go check this out, because it was all really cool. And, how often do you, crash a spacecraft into an asteroid? Not very often. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. It was exciting. And then of course, when it was done, I'm like, okay, now I got to get to work. But, maybe 3 or 4 minutes before the impact, the mission team servers stopped responding.
Oh no.
So I think they just, broke the internet, kind of a thing. My assumption is they were, all the scientists were hitting it, trying to get the next image, because that's what I was doing too. That it just overwhelmed them. And I was like, okay, I'll just not worry about it. And then I don't know, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, the servers were back. I downloaded the data and started plotting along with that.
What are you working on with the images right now? Can you tell us what's going on?
So there was a radar shape model that was made, and that's sort of our starting position. And as I said, we have the images. Well, the spacecraft uses a star tracker to identify where it's pointing, and then we have a lot of telemetry. So we know where Didymos is, and we know where the spacecraft is, and we know where it's looking, plus or minus error. So when I get an image, I pull it into my system, and I will get a view that's like, here's a picture of the image. Here's what the shape model would look like with the same viewing geometry, but there's error. So the spacecraft could be, or the object could be here, and the shape model could be here. And then I have to go and use either manual or automatic tools to find the adjustment so that they're at the same, basically they're co-registered.
Right.
And so that's the first thing that you have to do. And a lot of that just comes down to there's errors in flight. One of the big errors is when they do a burn, they never actually know exactly how much fuel exited. It's plus or minus. That's one of the, as far as I can tell, that's one of the biggest errors they have, is the exact amount of fuel that burns. So they don't know the exact delta V. And so they, when you have that, then you take op-nav images to identify where you are now, so you can figure out how much that burn was, and that's a reconstruct. Well, we didn't have that. We don't have that opportunity with DART. It's whatever the predicted trajectory is. So that was a little bit off. So I'm having to go through and make those corrections. So that's what I'm doing right now, is first get them all to align. Then I sit there and see, okay, the shape model that we had from radar is off by a certain amount. I'll start making adjustments. And then at that point, I'll start, the rest of the processing of identifying limb points, feeding that into the model, and identifying surface features, and making small little digital train models of the leading surface that we saw, and then building that all into a structure.
What were your thoughts when you started to see the detail in both Didymos and Dimorphos? Were there surprising things to you? Were there, what was interesting? What caught your attention? What made you kind of go, wow?
So I was surprised at how elongated Didymos was. So the radar shape model is a little bit more rounded, and in the images, it's much more elongated. So that was one of the corrections that I've had to make, and that was really cool. And of course, we were expecting Dimorphos to be, kind of this, oval pointed at Didymos. So we were expecting that, but I don't think very many people were expecting it to be as elongated as it was. So that's really cool. I liked on Didymos around the equator, because it's spinning relatively fast. It looks like there's smoother areas there, which is kind of cool. So that makes you think that there's mass wasting. Honestly, that is what we more expected Bennu to look like. We expected to find regions that were somewhat smooth, because Eros had that. So we were kind of expecting to see that there. That actually, in my mind, was, oh my goodness, this is what Bennu was supposed to look like, so we could take a sample. And then, of course, Bennu didn't cooperate. And then the other thing, especially when I was looking at Dimorphos, was the kind of the size distribution of the class. Clearly, it's a rubble pile, but looking at that, and I didn't see as much small stuff, the fine, kind of the fine regolith grains. It seemed like a lot more. Is bouldery an actual word? Anyway, a lot more large rock shards than fine material, and that was probably the most striking thing there. I was looking at that.
I do recall seeing that someone had mentioned that the shape model for Didymos was more similar to Ryugu and Bennu, with that sort of, two pyramids stacked on each other kind of look. But yeah, and it was surprising when it came into view, and we all kind of went, that's not what any of us were expecting. And I think the best comment I heard or read, someone said that they're going to say that Dimorphos looked like a Scotch egg. And I went back and looked at the pictures and said, yeah, that's actually a fairly accurate thing to say. It's got that ovoid shape, and it's very bumpy everywhere. So what is next for you? What comes next? Are you using images from Lycia Cube? Have you gotten any of that data in? I know they released a couple images early yesterday. Yeah,
the downlink's doing better than sort of what expected. They expected to get like one a day, and they're doing better than that, which is really cool. I haven't ingested any of that data, but that will be part of it, because it is a different view. So that fundamentally gives me a stereo geometry. So you have two different viewing conditions looking at the same place, and you register where that place is on each image, and then you can triangulate that position in 3D space. So that's one of the core components that we use. So that's one of the nice things, is Lycia Cube giving us that call it an out of plane dimension, because Draco, it's all within one soda straw, if you will. That's all that we saw all the way in, and so this pulls us out into a different plane, so we can get some stereo, which gives us a more accurate shape model. but I
Does
haven't gotten there yet.
does Lichia Cube get to move around the system, or is it kind of just going through it? I wasn't very clear on the path on that one.
I haven't looked at all the details, so I'm a little bit from first principles. It's obvious, but I've never seen it. I haven't looked to see it, but it was released like a week and a half ago. I don't believe it has any thrusters whatsoever.
Okay.
Maybe it has some positioning stuff. I'm not really sure in terms of its design, but it's traveling at 6 kilometers per second. You're not going to slow that thing down. So as my understanding, it was a single pass to the system. And so now it's nowhere close to the system anymore, just data, its purpose is to data link stuff back to us. So really great thing the Italians did.
Right. And any idea how many images they think they got from it? Any word on that?
I don't. It's probably in the tech documents, but I haven't spent the time to dig it out.
So what are you excited? Are you looking forward to the Hera mission? Is that going to be involved in this, or will you have kind of wrapped up the shape modeling by that point in time? Because I know that's 2 years down the road for launch and 4 years down the road for arrival. So that's, science is a long game, space science is anyway. So is that going to be involved in the shape modeling later, or will you have moved on by then?
I will have moved on. The DART funding ends, basically about a year, and that at that point we're done. Hera is an ESA mission. So I don't believe that I don't think I've seen any participating scientist on it as an expectation. So that, having that participation directly doesn't seem like it's likely. However, the data comes in, it will be definitely in a position where we could fuse it into the model, and at that point they're going to be getting, full rotation of the object. We'll be able to fix that backside that we have to, extrapolate out based on theory, update a lot of the imagery. So hopefully I'll be able to do that. But we have, there's a variety of European colleagues that do shape modeling too. So I don't want to step on their toes.
So what is next for you after the post-DART mission euphoria wears off?
Well, the bulk of my work normally goes into managing the asteroid subnode of the planetary data system, where we archive all the asteroid data. So dealing with getting the data in, running a data center, archiving standards, working with missions to help them get their documents all squared away. So that's a lot of it right now. There's a few other projects that I help out in terms of building topography on the moon, some of the Saturnian and Jovian smaller satellites, doing some work there. So that's at I more help out than actually do most of the work. They're not paying me much to do it.
What is the asteroid node for PDS? What is PDS? I'm sure, I personally know, but for our audience, what is PDS? NASA data never dies kind of thing. Why are we doing this? Why are we keeping all of this data for the asteroids?
So it's one of the discussions is this is very expensive data. The data that we have from NASA missions, first of all, you gotta throw in a launch vehicle, which is really expensive. You have a huge engineering team, a science team running the mission. And a lot of times this is data that we'll probably never get again. We're not gonna probably, there's a lot of missions that we just either won't go back there or we won't do that. So this data is unique, and you can't say it's priceless because it actually has a price tag, but it is very, very expensive. And way back when, what happened is we had, during the Apollo era, some of the original lunar images, these fabulous, gorgeous images were brought back, and we made prints of them and sent them out. And the originals, well, what do you do with, original film? Well, you got to store it somewhere. And so they stored it somewhere. And then people changed jobs, and that storage locker got moved down down the hall and then down to the basement, and they ended up getting stored next to a locker that had acetone in it, as if I understand the story right. And the fumes,
oh no,
kind of went over. And so these incredibly high resolution images of the moon, that are basically irreplaceable, were destroyed. So we have, and talking to Dr. Jay Malash when I was going through school, he was like, I remember seeing an image of the moon that had this feature, and I cannot find that image again, because the best I can find is a third generation print. I can't get first generation or second generation, can't find it. So that feature that was, that I was able to see, I can't show that it's there, because I can't find that data anymore. So that started, I don't know, 30, 35 years ago, with a real earnest desire that we archive the data for all future generations. So our mantra in the planetary data system is that we archive the mission data, planetary science data in general, for up to 50, maybe even 100 years. And we try to use formats and structures that don't assume Microsoft or Photoshop or anything proprietary. So they're very open standards, are well documented, and they're very basic, so that 70 years from now, when that software company doesn't exist and nobody has that software, people can still read and use the data. So that's a big task. And that's where we put a lot of effort into it, to make sure that this very expensive data survives.
Thank you for telling us how you have been involved in DART, what your day was like, and also for talking about the vast majority of your work, which I know is on the PDS system. So that's fantastic. Definitely want to talk to you about that some other time and get more into that. This has been sort of an amazing, wild week. I hope you have gotten more sleep than I have. And I know Amanda Sycophus did not get a lot of sleep either. So, and I know you also had a DART meeting earlier today. So, good luck on analyzing all of this data. And I hope that it really does prove useful for you, and also in the general context of planetary defense, which is what the whole purpose was. Some of these side science benefits are fantastic, though. So thank you, Eric, for joining us today and for talking to us.
My pleasure. Have a good day.
All right, you too. Thank you so much.